Good morning, everybody. My name is Deborah Byrne from Deborah Byrne Psychology Services, known across social media as DBpsychology. So this morning we're going to talk about perfectionism, and it's this week's blog. Don't forget there are a lot of blogs up there on the website at this stage, well over 100. The daily motivation, as always, goes up every day that you can use for just to reflect upon or use it in your journal. So getting into it. So perfectionism. I think we've all heard this, particularly in relation to codependence. You might have heard about other conditions as well. You might hear, oh, they're real perfectionist. But in particular, codependence can take on a perfectionist trait, and it's very debilitating, and it's an illusion basically. So what is perfectionism? It's a need to appear perfect or to be perfect, that whole illusion of being perfect, having the perfect lifestyle, the perfect body, to have the perfect house, the perfect everything has to be perfect. And it can happen to teens as well, particularly in educational settings where we see they're trying to strive for the highest grade, and anything above 100% is that's a failure as far as they're concerned. So impossible standards is what we're talking about here. And so then as a result, people who suffer with this, and it is a condition and it is a suffering that people take on, they become very stressed, overwhelmed, high levels of anxiety, can lead to depression and lead to relationship problems. And it's not just relationship problems with their partner. It'll problems with their children, problems with other relatives, problems with friends, problems with colleagues. So it's all encompassing, this whole idea of perfectionism. So there's basically three types of perfectionist. The first one is a personal standards perfectionist, and they will set very high standards for themselves. So and other people will see that as being impossible. How could you possibly reach that? This is not, it's way above what other people would expect. And again, that will lead them to be stressed and burnt out in this case. Self-critical, which is the second one, self-critical perfectionists. Again, we're talking about criticism. So they're using criticism to, and it's negative criticism, to keep themselves or their loved ones, achieving, or other people, not just loved ones, but other people, colleagues and that, to a set standard, a set height. So again, the goals are ridiculous, and it's a negative criticism of themselves or others they're using. Again, ends up being very stressed, very anxious, problems in the relationship, and they have this constant negative critic going on in their head. And the third type then is socially prescribed perfectionism. Now, within that group, it's divided into two subsections. So we have the first slot, which I think we have all heard about, or we're all seeing on social media and in the media, and that is somebody that has to reach a certain level in either the ideal body type or lifestyle, or the pictures on all the social media has to be perfect. It has to show a perfect lifestyle. So imagine how much stress and pressure that puts on a human being. Overwhelm, stress can develop, eating disorders will develop there, self-harm. So this is very, very serious self-harm, even suicidal thoughts, high anxiety. So imagine having that. Now the other subsection is something that society does as a whole, and we put a certain level of expectation on certain careers and people in certain professions to have a level of perfectionism. And that would be in terms of legal, doctors, architects, engineers, anything with something that is, a high level of accuracy is involved, and what is required. So society, in that group of society, can place an awful lot of pressure on these people. And then again, of course, you will have, and we do see it. We do see the consequences of it, of high stress in that job, high levels of anxiety in that job, overwhelm in that job, and unfortunately self-harm and suicide in that in some of those jobs, which is very, very unfortunate. So that is something perhaps as a society we need to stop and think about. Now, I talk about, there's about 16 common signs of perfectionism, and I talk about those in the blog, so you can check that out at www.debrabyrnepsychologyservices.com. And I'll put a link in the description below. But when does it all start? When does this idea of perfectionism start? For a lot of people, it can start as young as childhood. So it is a learned behaviour. It is not something you're born with, okay? Straight up, not something we are born with. This is not a trait we're born with. This is a learned behaviour. This is something we use. We adapt. We're adapting to the situation we are involved in. So therefore, it can be learned in childhood, but it can also be as a result of some sort of trauma. So I'm talking about domestic violence, sexual abuse, both as an adult, maybe a sexual assault as as a child, sexual abuse as a child, but sexual assault as an adult, or some other educational setting. Sometimes the pressure on us in our education as a teen can cause this perfectionism to develop, and therefore, we develop all the stress and the anxiety and the overwhelm, and can push somebody towards suicide and self-harm, unfortunately. So it can be quite deadly to have this problem. How can we let it go? First off, if we don't recognise that we have it, and we don't acknowledge that we have it, we can't do anything about it. We can't ask for help. And I have to stress this, because it can have manifested so badly that it has expanded into the overwhelm, the stress, and further, as I said, into possible suicidal thoughts. You may need, if this is you or you think this is a loved one, they will need professional intervention there. So I have to stress that at this point, they need intervention. So GP or a therapist, you can self-refer to a therapist. They will tailor make a program to help you let go of this and help you with all the other symptoms that have manifested with regard to that, and then get to the root cause, what caused this in the first place, and help you cope better and deal with it for yourself, and to move forward and let go of all this illusion of perfect. The key really with letting go of perfectionism is self-forgiveness and self-acceptance. There's going to be an awful lot of shame and guilt and anger involved in this condition. So we need to learn to forgive ourselves and to accept ourselves for who we are right now in this moment in time. And also then there'll be the shame and the guilt and the anger and all other emotions around the root cause of this as well. So you can see why you may need a therapist for this. But of course there are things, if it isn't as bad, if it hasn't become so overwhelming, if it hasn't become so stressful, if you aren't having suicidal thoughts and you think, I'm picking up some of these things, I'm picking up some traits here of perfectionism and I want to let them go. There are self-help things, and I always try and give people some self-help that you can do right now to help yourself. And that is, and I'll always say it, basic self-care. We have to start with our foundation, which is basic self-care. You have to be eating right, you have to be exercising, you have to be looking after yourself appropriately. This has to be a healthy way. If somebody has developed an eating disorder, then that we need psychiatric help there. So that, I'm not talking about somebody like that. We have to start setting healthy boundaries, both with ourselves and in our relationships. Most people that have perfectionism are very busy people. They are also people who take on others' responsibilities. So reviewing your priorities and setting a healthy boundary and saying no to people. This is something you have to start learning to do, is to say no. Somebody with perfectionism will also have very low self-esteem. So we have to start building our self-esteem. It is, these are This is vital in helping us to also accept ourselves. And I've talked about these things before, and I've listed out how you can do that in previous blogs. And they're all linked out in this week's blog. All linked out, little self-help tools and tips that you can do to help build yourself up, build your self-confidence up, and build your self-care in, and set those boundaries with people and learn to say no. It also means deleting negative people from your life. And I'm talking about, you've taken on other people's responsibility. People will be negative people, negative vampires will be attracted to you because you're going to take on their stuff. You're going to do their things for them. You are going to be, attracting these people into your life. So you need to delete them and say, okay, don't feel guilty about it, because they will just move on to somebody else, and they will find somebody else that they can, get to do the things for them that you have been doing. So don't feel guilty about it. They'll always find somebody else. These negative people will always find somebody else to do it for them. Vital, again, with this whole thing of letting go of perfectionism is to build your support system. And I talked about that a couple of weeks ago, how important, there's four types of support systems we all need in our life. And again, I have linked that out, and the blog is here on Facebook. So if you just want to run down through all, just go to videos and you'll see all the videos, and you'll find the one on building a support system and how vital that is, particularly at this time. We need to be tapping in to a bigger support system than we are probably used to at this stage. And as I said, recognizing and accepting that you need help, recognizing and acknowledging that you have this trait of perfectionism is going to be a key here. Because we cannot take action, we cannot self-help, we cannot ask for help if we don't recognize it, if we do not accept that this is where we are. So our first step is always to recognize and acknowledge, okay, maybe I have a perfectionist trait, maybe I have, it has become a problem for me, and then accepting that. We often forget to accept before we jump into action, and that can lead to an awful lot of problems for people with anything. If you are trying to change anything, if you do not acknowledge it and accept it before jumping into action and taking some small steps to help yourself, then you will run into problems. You'll just, on a very wide scale, you're going to run into problems. It'll be in terms of even keeping up the motivation, keeping up your willpower levels. They're going to run out very quickly if you try to take too big a step and you try to move too quickly on this. You have to have patience here with yourself. You're not going to change overnight. You are going to fall into traps, and that is quite common. We will fall back into old ways, and even in a little while down the road you may find yourself, oh, I fell down again, I fell into a trap again. The motivation and the willpower and everything else will come by taking the small steps and building those small wins for yourself. And then you'll see, okay, even if you do have a relapse, you'll see, sure, I've done this before, I can do this again. And you will continue on. You won't always go back to the beginning. You will go forward and keep moving all the time. We always keep moving forward. We never ever go back to the beginning, because we've built up our knowledge, we've built up our awareness, we have begun to accept ourselves, we've begun to set boundaries. So we're never, don't become fearful if you do relapse, because we never really go all the way back. And as I said, self-help is also about reviewing your priorities, reviewing what you're doing for everybody else, and starting with you first. That's what we need to get down to. We need to bring it all the way down. So we need to do a brain dump, everything down, everything out of your head, no matter whether it's business or personal. Just get it all down and all out on paper. And then decide between business and personal. Then you'll have two columns. It does not have to be perfect, guys, here. Just list everything out, get it all down, and then running through that and see, well, is there something in this list that is actually somebody else's, responsibility? If in business, if you are working and you are taking on other people's responsibilities, and supporting them and keeping them propped up, you're not doing you're not doing yourself any favors, but you're not doing the business any favors either. You're being very disrespectful as well to the people you're working with and to your colleague who isn't doing their job, because you're saying to them, you're not capable of doing your job. If they're not, then they need to leave. Then they need to get trained up to do it again. They need to get training or whatever they need. Accepting somebody's laziness is not on you. Okay, that is for your boss if you're working for somebody else. If you are employing somebody and they are not doing their job, then they are costing you money. So you have to be, we have to get real about this. We have to think about this. It's not just costing you physically and mentally, but it may be costing you financially as well. So you have to think about this and be realistic. That's in terms of business. In terms of your personal life, please show them the respect. Please show people the respect that they are capable adults, capable of doing their own things. So hand it back to them. You are being respectful. You are setting a boundary and saying, I trust that you are an adult, that you can do what you need to do for you, and I am going to take care of me and what I need to do for me. And that's okay. And then if you delete those, then if you need help or you need to delegate, then you do that as well. And that should bring you down to a more realistic to-do list. And then I would break that down further and say, okay, what do I need to do that are small, doable steps that I can get done today? You have to let go of everything else. You have to set the priorities for today, and tomorrow we'll think about tomorrow. Yes, you can plan out a week, but people that are perfectionists tend to overestimate what they can get done in one day. So please don't do that. You have to start overestimating the time that it is going to take you to do even the smallest step. So you're adding in a little bit of extra time there, and you're also adding in some transition time. Particularly if we're at home at the moment, we are used to having cues at work maybe that we are going to be missing now at home if we're trying to work from home. So, and those cues give us transition time between one task and another task. So allow yourself even a few minutes and take a break for a cup of coffee or something to use that as a cue. Use other things as a cue to transition then to the second task or the third task or whatever it is you're doing. So, set realistic goals. This is part of self-help, is to set realistic goals and break them down into very, very small, manageable steps. And I've talked about this back in January, so do check that out. And all above all this then is, of course, we will have our negative self-talk. We will always have this with somebody who has perfectionism. And a lot of us can be guilty of that, is to have negative self-talk going on in our head, which will normally have developed from childhood. So you have to start, thinking about that. Who's telling me I can't do something? Who's telling me I have to have it at this level or this standard? And that requires you to use some of your basic self-care and to do meditation. I always talk about meditation as a basic self-care. And I've talked about this in the week about the using the 7-11 technique. If you've never used any meditation at all, the 7-11 technique is actually something that's really good, very quick to learn, and you can just use it for 3 minutes at a time, spaced out throughout the day to reduce your stress levels and to recenter yourself and calm the brain. The brain calms down when you use the 7-11 technique. It's an automatic habit that the brain will do when you use this technique. I have free worksheets up on my resources page. All you have to do, no sign-ups, just click down, just scroll down, and you just click and download the ones down near the end. There's a brain dump sheet, there's a negative thoughts sheet to help you look at the patterns of what way you're thinking. So you can just go to the website and have a look at those and see can you do it. Above all, even if you were to look at all your thoughts and start breaking them down and see a pattern of what is, underneath all this and why you're thinking the way you are. Usually it's about not feeling good enough. So even using an affirmation like I am good enough is a great way to get you started on changing that negative tape in your head and rewriting it, because that's what we need to do. We need to rewrite the negative tape in our head and start to tell ourselves we are good enough. We are good enough. You have to say that I am good enough. And we need to be doing that at least 10 times at a go, 3 times a day, for approximately 21 days. Now, I would say you're going to need longer than that. To be honest with you, you need to be saying this. If this is ingrained in you that you aren't good enough, and this is, part of your root cause, that this was the message you received that you weren't good enough, then you need to be using that affirmation a minimum every single day for 3 months. I know that's a long time for somebody to think about that, but if you think about it, the negative thoughts took probably decades to build up in your head, probably over the course of the first 18 years of your life or more. So this all went into your head over a longer period. So 3 months is not a long time when you think about it. That the negative thoughts built up. They stacked one on top of the other over a long period, over many years. That if we just spend that amount of time, it can help. And positive affirmations do work. We know that from research. So think about doing that. Start switching the tape in your head. And the other way you can help is to focus on the positive every day. A lot of time with perfectionism, we don't actually see what we have right this minute in time. We are always striving for the higher standard, for the next goal. It's almost like we're at that conveyor belt, and it's like next, and we don't stop to see what we already have and acknowledge. Again, we're going back to acknowledging and accepting what we have. And we know from research that gratitude is one of the ways that we can boost our mental health up higher and keep it there for longer if we practice it on a daily basis. Now, I'm not saying to somebody you have to sit down and start doing long lists of gratitude for everything you are, and maybe you don't feel like you have something you can be grateful for, but we all do, and we can bring it back down to a very basic level if we need to. And all you need to do is at the end every night, if you're doing your brain dump at the end of every night, to get all those worries out of your head, getting everything down on paper, and you're using your journal that way, and which will help get your night's sleep a lot better. Then at the end of that, just 3 things you're grateful for. And if you keep doing it, even if it feels a bit robotic at the start, just 3 things you're grateful for, it can build very, very quickly and boost your mental health, and very quickly, as I said, and get you thinking, changing. We're trying to change your way of thinking back to being good enough and to see what you already have. So we're trying to change into a positive mindset, because perfectionism is quite a negative mindset, and we're trying to build that positivity there. So if you could just try that. And the last thing I will leave you with is recognize when you need help, and please ask for it. So if you feel that this has become such a problem for you, if you are very stressed and overwhelmed by the amount of things you are having to do to keep this perfect going, then I would suggest you are in trouble and that you need professional help. Don't forget, you can go to your GP, you can ask for help from your GP, but you can also self-refer to a private counsellor or a psychologist. So I will leave it at that. Please don't be afraid to reach out for help. All the free worksheets, and there's loads of them, and I will, as I said, I will keep updating them. I know people need them right now. And as I said, if anybody has a particular worksheet that they used with a therapist in the past, send me a private message on Messenger, or send me a direct message on Twitter, and I don't mind putting that up, or ask somebody else to ask me. And I don't mind going and getting those and putting them up for you, that you can just then click and download. There's no need to sign up for anything. So do check it out. It's at www.deborahbyrnespsychologyservices.com, and there are plenty of blogs up there for anxiety, quick 10-minute de-stressors, that I did last week, and I did a video on that last week for people right now, that you can use that you can put into your routine throughout the day. Little ones, just the 10 minutes, maybe you can use those as cues to transition between different tasks that you're trying to do. So they're all up there, and as I said, there's plenty of blogs, plenty of podcasts, plenty of videos already up on the website and on Facebook, so do check that out. And thank you all for listening this morning, and I'll talk to you all again next week. Thank you.